but that doesn't mean that we're finished, because we're now going to do the deep dives, as we did in the morning, in the breakout sessions. Let me quickly remind you of how it's done. You're right at the moment watching us in the stream, so please scroll down from the window where you're actually sort of seeing us here in the studio. You will find the three windows, breakout session 1, 2, and 3. There is a button called Join Session. Don't click on it right now, because let me guide you through the process. You will then be led into a Zoom environment, and within the Zoom you can actually discuss just as much as in the morning. Places are scarce. Some of you have already sort of pre-announced where they want to discuss. Please stick to that, and all the others, you just have to be faster if you prefer one particular session. We wish you a lot of fun for the next 60 minutes. We're of course going to report back on the highlights, respectively on the takeaways of what was in the breakout sessions, and then we go by it all up. It's now almost 2 o'clock. We have 60 minutes in the breakout sessions, so we're going to be a tad later in finishing later on this afternoon. And from now on, we wish you good discussions. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, here in our studio in Hamburg. And of course, we are now in the wrap-up session after the breakouts that we did this afternoon. And of course, we want to know what was happening. I see that we've already have the rapporteur of impact investment, Johannes Weber. So maybe, Johannes, you could share with us the takeaways, the key messages of this afternoon session.
Well, Kanye, thank you very much. It was once again a very inspiring session about impact investing together with Kanini. I mean, most of you have heard her inspiring speech and the key statements. The main points that we discussed were, first of all, it was again on the definition of impact, which is a kind of evergreen in this discussion. And Kanini pointed out that it's important to really focus on this intentionality, that we really want to have a change and create change with investments. And then we focused more on this question of foundations and impact investing. And we pointed out that impact investing could really be a tool for foundation, another tool for foundations to create impact. But so far, foundations do not use this tool. So Kanini presented figures that only 8% of foundation spending is spent into impact investments. And then we came to the question of what is the reason for that? And I think there are many reasons. And very different reasons. So a lot of is going back to the question: how can we align like commercial interests and impact interests? So how do we bring together this world of finance and the world of social and environmental things? And this has a kind of meta dimension in like metrics and measuring, but it has also a very practical dimension in the question of how do we put together teams? Do we have one team for the investment side of the foundation as well as the grant giving foundation? And how can we bring together these two worlds? And with regard to the question, how can you get started and what's important for us, Kanini pointed out that it's really, really important to bring in the board of the foundation and convince them of the idea of impact investing. And I think that were the main points in our discussion. I want to thank Kanini for their great input and all the participants of this breakout.
Johannes, thank you very much for this very concise summary of the impact investment and foundations invested in it. And Catherine Howarth was both the moderator and is now also the rapporteur for the future of Divest Invest. Again, in a succinct way, what were your takeaways and maybe how did they differ from this morning?
Good afternoon. Yes, we had a different group, and so we had a different conversation. Lots of common themes, of course, with this morning, but I'm just going to pick out, and actually they very much build on the points that Johannes has just made. We talked a lot about the fact that foundations need a great deal of support and assistance in getting on this journey of truly aligning their investments and their mission, their investments and their grant giving. It's not easy stuff, and it can feel a little intimidating. There are some foundations that already have a lot of profile that are really well advanced on this journey. So we talked a lot about the need for kind of role models, for case studies that really help foundations, the hundreds of thousands of foundations who haven't really started on this journey of creating that alignment, giving them the tools, support, and almost kind of one-to-one, sometimes peer group enabling within the foundation sector to make that journey. We talked about the fact that emerging market foundations are often, quite far behind on this, and they need particular help. So I don't know whether there's scope to kind of link up foundations in the global north with those in the emerging markets to help them on this journey. We had a strong intervention about the need to start with the very simple step of defining your intention as a foundation, and then aligning everything, whether it's your grant giving or your investment strategy, around that sort of North Star of your clearly defined intention. Once that's defined, needs to be at the board level, kind of everything else can flow can fall into place. We talked about the need for education in the intermediary sector. So a lot of the organizations that advise foundations or providing them with investment services of one sort or another are not yet where they need to be in having the capacity themselves to advise foundations on this journey. There's almost too many resources available now. It can be overwhelming, and every asset management firm, it seems, out there has got a new ESG product. So how on earth do foundations really identify what's credible? They need a lot of help with that. So we identified that huge challenge of really knowing what's for real and what's not in this space. We talked about the simple step that foundations can take of just allocating a single dedicated staff member and having the resource released internally to have a single dedicated staff member that focuses on this alignment between the organization's grant giving and its investment strategy. Because once you've got an internal champion who's dedicated to this, a lot of things in our experience can flow from that. We talked about how it is much easier to divest than to invest. And frankly, a lot of foundations have started on the divest journey, but the invest piece remains a bit elusive, if we're honest. Mm-hmm. But all in all, there was actually a lot of positivity about the scope and the pace of the journey. I wanted to just issue a challenge that Sagarika, who was giving input in our session, made to our group, but take that broader, which is, join the COP26 Race to Zero campaign. That could be, when we have the COP26 next year, every foundation, who's part of this wonderful F20 event could make that a landmark moment for your foundation in terms of the commitment you make. Mm-hmm. There's also soon to be launched a Race to Resilience campaign, which again, we see a huge role in our group for the foundation sector on the resilience piece, because many communities all over the world are going to be devastated by climate impacts. And as foundations, we need to be involved both as grant givers and in terms of our investments in accelerating the sophistication of the response to creating resilience. So I'll leave it there. Yeah. But I just want to thank my group. We had a wonderful conversation, and I feel we've left you, I hope, at the plenary level with some good thoughts.
Thank you very much for the summary and also for your enthusiasm that quite obviously showed now. And the Road to Zero by the UNFCCC may be an idea that we should reverberate in a moment, but that will only happen after we've looked at public finance and green recovery. And as this morning, Alexander Alaoui will be reporting back to us. Alexander.
Hi, everyone. Yeah, I'm reporting back from a tremendously engaged and powerful group, I have to say. It was a diverse set of points that were made during our session. So to start off with Nihal Shabrak, our sort of speaker in this session, I'm rephrasing her a little bit, but what she basically said is, forget banks, commercial banks, that is to say, they've been known to act slowly. They have been, sort of the last institutions in sort of this discussion on greening the economy. Move to central banks. They create money with the M1 money creation. They can change banks, and there had been, many initiatives around central banks, looking at macroprudential regulation, looking at changing capital requirements, the discussion about the green supporting factor here in the European Union, or linking, quantitative easing to green requirements. And then also the discussion around carbon credits and how we can actually use them in our process of reserve creation. So lot of very, hands-on proposals on that side. Also her argument around, changing the rules of accounting, introducing a net present value of 1 additional ton of carbon emitted, so we can actually price things correctly. A link to that discussion, we had one, I think, very intriguing intervention looking at the role of the MDBs, as we should focus more on their capacity to price in carbon risks and not let this left with or to the markets, the whole discussion around stranded assets and all that. So that has been very insightful. We then looked at the existence of initiatives already in that space. They are active here, for example, the NGFS. We shared the, I think, impression that the NGFS has done good work around these issues. However, it needs to be much more sharper and more focused. We need to collectivize initiatives such as those and bring those discussions back to the local level as well. We did then end up by saying, what could be very concrete, precise proposals now for the G20 and obviously for the F20 as well. And I'm just naming 2 or 3, let's say. First of all, we also have to shift away from this G20-centric look view, which is to say, and look more at the V20 in a sense, they don't have the same macroeconomic instruments at their disposal then obviously with the G20 looking at debt relief and debt instruments, for example. Then also we said, but for those who can and have these instruments in place, come and join the NGFS, for example. And then secondly, borrowing from one experience made here in Germany with the Sustainable Finance Council, which is an advisory council that goes directly to Chancellor Merkel, reports back to her. How about that all the other G20 countries establish such a framework? So a very lively, diverse debate. And I think we can take out many lessons from that.
Thank you very much, also for keeping to the almost 2 minutes. Well, not quite counting. And then with that, thank you not just to you, but to the rapporteurs and moderators of the 3 afternoon breakout sessions. So thank you to Catherine, Johannes, and Alexander.